Happy New Year, everyone! All in Arrowhead here. Week 17 was the kind of weekend that reminds you why the final stretch of the NFL season always feels heavier, where every snap carries more weight and every result starts to reshape the bigger picture. We saw teams at the top of the standings handle business and show exactly why they belonged there, leaning on their strengths and trusting their identities, whether that meant controlling games on the ground, winning with defense and field position, or executing just well enough in tight moments to avoid disaster. Several playoff berths like Green Bay and Houston were officially clinched, and a handful of division races finally started to separate, giving certain teams clarity while leaving others staring at a narrow path forward. At the same time, losses by fringe contenders tightened the race even further, turning what once felt like comfortable positions into situations that now require perfection or outside help. Division rivalries once again played spoiler, with emotional, physical games that swung momentum and reminded us how unpredictable December football can be, especially when familiar opponents know each other inside and out. Even teams already out of the playoff picture refused to go quietly. As younger players stepped into bigger roles, offenses played more freely, and defenses continued to challenge playoff-bound teams, forcing them to earn every inch. We also saw coaching decisions magnified, late-game management tested, and the margin for error shrink to almost nothing as teams tried to balance aggression with discipline. Now, with Week 18 standing as the regular season finale, the league arrives at its most dramatic point, where playoff spots are partially secured, seeding remains in flux, multiple division titles are still undecided, and every game carries consequences that will echo into January. Let's get into the games! Carolina enters this NFC South title decider after a 27-10 loss to the Seahawks in Week 17 that exposed offensive inefficiency and turnovers while the defense made enough plays early to stay in it, as the Panthers managed only one field goal and a Bryce Young 10-yard rushing touchdown, while generating just 139 yards of offense and losing the turnover battle, forcing them into long third-down situations that Seattle consistently won on both sides of the ball. The Panthers' defense bent in the third quarter as Zach Charbonnet's short touchdown run and an A.J. Barner's scoring pass put the game away. And despite a spirited fourth-quarter drive, Carolina couldn't cut into a deficit that ballooned thanks to a stout Seattle pass rush and time of possession advantage for the visitors. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, comes into this winner-take-all clash after a 20-17 loss to the Dolphins in Week 17, in a game where Baker Mayfield threw for 346 yards and 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions, and Jalen McMillan was the bright spot with 7 catches for 114 yards and a back-and-forth contest that saw the Bucs defense miss tackles and give up big plays. And though Tampa Bay led early after a Chris Godwin touchdown drive, Miami answered with a long 63-yard Theo Weiss Jr. touchdown and a series of field goals that ultimately decided the game, highlighting Tampa Bay's ability to move the ball but also its inconsistency in finishing drives. Both teams now come into Week 18 with momentum swings of late and clear areas of strength. Carolina's defense can force stops but keep games close when their offense sustains drives, and Tampa Bay's passing attack has shown it can pile up yards even in defeat. But I'm picking the Buccaneers to rise to the occasion in this must-win game and take the NFC South crown, finishing 8-9 while the Panthers fall to 8-9 as well. Seattle heads into this winner-take-all battle for the NFC West and the number 1 seed, fresh off a 27-10 win over the Panthers in Week 17 that showcased how balanced and complementary this team can be, as running back Zach Charbonnet led the ground game with 110 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, while quarterback Sam Darnold managed the attack by completing 18 of 27 passes for 147 yards and a score, and Seattle's defense dominated by holding Carolina to just 139 total yards, forcing turnovers that swung field position and enabling the Seahawks to control the second half with time of possession advantage and physical play on both lines of scrimmage. San Francisco comes into this matchup after escaping a 42-38 shootout with the Bears, a performance defined by the 49ers' explosive scoring ability and clutch execution late, as Brock Purdy responded with an early interception to lead multiple touchdown drives, including a 38-yard scoring strike to Jawan Jennings in the closing minutes, and San Francisco finished with significantly more total offense than Chicago, while the defense made a key stop at the goal line to preserve the win, keeping the 49ers just one game behind the Seahawks in the NFC West and alive in the race for the top seed. This Week 18 duel is a classic contrast of styles. Seattle leaning on a stout run game and a defense that can suffocate opponents into mistakes, and San Francisco riding a high-octane offense capable of putting up points in bunches, but also giving up chunks in a shootout environment. And I'm going with the Seahawks to grind out enough key drives and defensive stands to secure the NFC West and the number 1 seed, improving to 14-3 while the 49ers finish 13-4, as Seattle's ability to control the tempo and limit explosive plays gives them the edge in this pivotal regular season finale. Indianapolis arrives in Week 18 after a 23-17 loss to the Jaguars in Week 17 that not only underscored how difficult the back half of the year has been for the club, but also saw their playoff hopes fizzle, as veteran quarterback Phillip Rivers completed 17 of 30 passes for 147 yards with 1 touchdown and an interception, and Jonathan Taylor contributed 70 rushing yards and a score, but the offense couldn't sustain enough consistent drives, struggled to convert in clutch moments, and saw its 6-game losing streak continue while being outgained significantly by Jacksonville's 370-204 total yard edge, ultimately falling short despite flashes of production. The Colts defense also had bright spots with timely pressures and stops that kept the game within reach until late, but they weren't able to force enough 3-and-outs or turnovers to swing a tight contest in their favor. And with their elimination from playoff contention already confirmed, this finale represents a chance to build momentum and close on a positive note. Houston, by contrast, enters this matchup coming off a 20-16 win over the Chargers in Week 17 that extended the Texans' longest winning streak of the season to 8 games and punched their 3rd consecutive postseason berth, in a game where C.J. Stroud passed for 244 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, while the Texans' run game and defense combined to keep Los Angeles off balance. Houston struck early with explosive touchdown plays of 75 and 43 yards to rookies Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, and while turnovers and pressure limited the passing game at times, the defense's ability to sack the quarterback consistently and make 3rd down stops proved decisive in a close contest. This Week 18 matchup showcases a Texans squad that found ways to win tight games late in the season against a Colts team still searching for rhythm and consistency. And I'm going with Houston to carry that momentum into the regular season finale and finish strong, giving the Texans the edge over Indianapolis as they close their season at 12-5, while the Colts finish at 8-9. Cleveland heads into Week 18 on a surprising high note after a 13-6 win over the Steelers in Week 17. A gritty defensive battle in which the Browns seized control early with a 28-yard touchdown pass from Shadur Sanders to Harold Fannin that ignited a 10-0 first-quarter lead and forced Pittsburgh into long, fruitless drives. And although Sanders threw 2 interceptions, a pair of clutch field goals from Andre Schmidt, and a stout defensive effort that kept the Steelers out of the end zone after the opening drive helped Cleveland grind out the victory and flip field position throughout the afternoon. Alex Wright, Carson Schwessinger, and Grant Delpit consistently collapsed the pocket in limited explosive plays. Alex Wright, Carson Schwessinger, and Grant Delpit consistently collapsed the pocket in limited explosive plays, twice holding Pittsburgh inside the red zone and denying a late 4th down attempt, which allowed the Browns to survive despite modest offensive output. Cincinnati arrives after a far more decisive 37-14 win over the Cardinals, where Joe Burrow set the tone early with a 13-yard touchdown pass to Jamar Chase, and the offense stayed efficient all afternoon, building a 16-7 halftime lead behind Samaje Perine's short rushing score and Evan McPherson's long field goal before putting away after the break, as Chase added another receiving touchdown and Chase Brown powered in 2 rushing scores, all while the Bengals defense kept Arizona bottled up and limited sustained drives. This matchup contrasts Cleveland's defense-first, low-margin approach with a Bengals team that showed balance, explosiveness, and cleaner execution in Week 17, and I'm picking Cincinnati to carry that momentum into the finale, closing the season at 7-10 with a win, while the Browns finish at 4-13 despite another competitive defensive effort. New Orleans enters Week 18 after a 34-26 win over the Titans in Week 17, a game where rookie quarterback Tyler Shuck delivered the most efficient performance of his young career by completing 22 of 27 passes for 333 yards and 2 touchdowns, spreading the ball to playmakers like Chris Olave, who hauled in 8 catches for 119 yards and a touchdown, and tight end Jawan Johnson, who added 4 receptions for 95 yards, as the Saints outgained Tennessee 423-336 and outplayed the Titans in the second half to rally from a double-digit deficit. Shuck's ability to make accurate throws in rhythm, and Audric Estime's 94 rushing yards and 32-yard touchdown run late in the game helped New Orleans sustain drives and control the clock when it mattered most, while defensive end Chase Young made a splash by forcing a strip sack that he converted into a defensive touchdown, adding critical points and energy. Atlanta heads into this Week 18 matchup after a 27-24 win over the Rams in Week 17, a game highlighted by an explosive night from Bijan Robinson, who set a franchise single-season scrimmage record for over 2,200 yards from scrimmage and provided game-changing plays, including a 93-yard touchdown run, while quarterback Kirk Cousins managed the offense with 2 touchdown passes and kept drives alive, and the Falcons' defense contributed a pick-6 by Jesse Bates that helped build the early lead. Both teams come off performances that showcase different identities. New Orleans riding rookie confidence and balanced production to a comeback win, and Atlanta leaning on Robinson's mismatch creating explosiveness paired with opportunistic defense. And I'm going with New Orleans to use its late-season momentum and complementary offense to edge the Falcons in this divisional matchup, finishing the season at 7-10 while the Falcons end at 7-10 as well. Green Bay comes into the regular season finale after a 41-24 loss to the Ravens in Week 17, a game that unraveled quickly as the Packers were forced into catch-up mode and never fully stabilized, despite Malik Willis throwing for 288 yards with a touchdown and adding 60 rushing yards and 2 scores, production that looks solid on paper but came largely while playing from behind. The bigger issue was balance, as Green Bay managed just 79 rushing yards as a team, leaving the offense one-dimensional, and defensively the Packers struggled badly against the run, allowing Baltimore to control the game on the ground and dominate time of possession, which kept Green Bay's defense on the field for extended stretches and led to repeated breakdowns. Minnesota, on the other hand, enters Week 18 riding a 23-10 win over Detroit, a game that perfectly reflected the Vikings' recent identity, as the defense completely dictated the outcome by forcing 6 turnovers, recording 5 sacks, and consistently winning the field position battle, while the offense played complementary football rather than needing to carry the load. Max Brosmer finished just 9 of 16 for 51 yards, but Minnesota didn't need volume passing, leaning instead on timely rushing, mistake-free execution, and a 65-yard Jordan Addison touchdown run that put the game out of reach late. This matchup comes down to whether Green Bay can rediscover offensive balance and tighten up defensively after being overwhelmed in Week 17, or whether Minnesota's defense can once again control the tempo and create short fields. And I'm leaning towards the Vikings to ride that defensive momentum, grind this game down, and finish the season on a high note at 9-8. While the Packers stumbled to 9-7-1 after another difficult matchup for their run defense. Tennessee enters Week 18 coming off a 34-26 loss to the Saints in Week 17, a game in which rookie quarterback Cam Ward showed promise by completing 21 of 40 passes for 251 yards and 2 touchdowns, while taking care of the football despite a costly strip sack return for a touchdown by Chase Young that swung momentum. And Tony Pollard surpassed 1,000 rushing yards on the season behind improved run blocking, even as the Titans ultimately couldn't keep pace with New Orleans' late-game scoring rallies, underscoring a persistent issue this year of moving efficiently in crucial moments and converting yardage into enough points to win. Jacksonville arrives in this matchup after edging the Colts 23-17 in Week 17, a close game where Trevor Lawrence continued his steady leadership by rushing for 2 short touchdowns that helped offset more modest passing numbers, and the Jaguars' defense made enough stops to limit Indianapolis' scoring opportunities, holding the Colts under 20 points while forcing a series of stalled drives and keeping the game within reach until Jacksonville's late possessions sealed it. The Jaguars' offense showed a nice balance between ground and air when it counted, and the defense, while not dominant, bent but didn't break, which helped preserve the lead. In contrast, the Titans' offense, while showing flashes from Ward in the run game, struggled to sustain long drives and yielded too many big plays on defense in Week 17, leaving unanswered questions about consistency. I'm picking the Jaguars to close the season strong with a win in Week 18 and finish 13-4, while the Titans wrap up at 3-14, as Jacksonville's complementary playmaker executions give them the edge in this late season matchup. Dallas enters Week 18 after a 30-23 win over the Commanders on Christmas that was anchored by a strong all-around performance from Dak Prescott, who completed 19 of 37 passes for 307 yards and 2 touchdowns, while the ground game carried its weight with 211 rushing yards, including 103 from Malik Davis, as the Cowboys jumped ahead early and converted multiple fourth-down attempts to sustain long, clock-eating drives and neutralize Washington's late comeback bid. CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens helped stretch the field, and the defense bent just enough to hold off Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt's 105-yard, 2-touchdown day, showcasing that Dallas can still execute complementary football, even in a season without playoff implications. New York arrives in this finale after a surprisingly decisive 34-10 win over the Raiders in Week 17, a game in which rookie quarterback Jackson Dart was efficient and dynamic, completing 22 of 30 passes for 207 yards and added 48 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns, while Wan'Dale Robinson hauled in 11 receptions for 113 yards, helped by a defensive effort that produced turnovers and limited explosive plays to hand the Giants their first road win since 2024 and snap a long skid. That victory gave New York positive momentum to end a difficult campaign and showed how they can become competitive when Dart manages the offense effectively and their playmakers get involved early. In Week 18, the Cowboys will look to finish with a non-losing record by leaning on a balanced possession-grinding performance that has looked best late in games, while the Giants hope to build on their rare offensive efficiency and force Dallas into contested down situations. And I'm going with the Cowboys to close the season strong and win this one, finishing 8-1 while the Giants wrap up at 3-14 as Dallas's blend of experience and balanced attack proves just a bit more consistent. Arizona comes into this finale after a 37-14 loss to the Bengals in Week 17, a game in which the Cardinals managed just 233 total yards and struggled to sustain momentum against a Cincinnati defense, forcing them into long down and distance situations where they couldn't consistently convert, while standout tight end Trey McBride continued piling up receptions and production, as the offense often relied on him as its most reliable target. But overall, Arizona's ground game stayed limited, and the defense had difficulty slowing down long scoring drives by the Bengals. Los Angeles enters this regular season finale after a 27-24 loss to the Falcons in Week 17, a contest where Matthew Stafford led the Rams with 269 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, yet also threw 3 interceptions that gave Atlanta extra possessions and swung field position, And although Los Angeles outgained its opponent and balanced its run game with Kyron Williams rushing for meaningful yardage, the defense had to bend early and allow multiple scores before tightening up enough for a late rally that ultimately fell short. This Week 18 matchup pits a Cardinals squad that has had few answers on either side of the ball against a Rams team capable of producing explosive offense but prone to situational mistakes. And I'm going with Los Angeles to finish the regular season strong, earning the win and improving to 12-5, while Arizona closes at 3-14, as the Rams, even in defeat last week, still possess more offensive firepower and the ability to control both sides of the ball when they're focused. Kansas City enters this regular season finale after a 20-13 loss to the Broncos in Week 17, a game in which the Chiefs' offense struggled to maintain momentum and finished with a modest 139 total yards, while Denver controlled the clock and had far more sustained success on offense, with the Broncos finishing with 303 total yards and converting long, methodical drives into a late go-ahead touchdown from Bo Nix and a short scoring pass to R.J. Harvey that sealed the victory. Chiefs quarterback Chris Oladokun was limited in production, throwing for just 66 yards and a touchdown, and while the Chiefs' defense managed turnovers and kept the game in reach through 3 quarters, Harrison Butker added field goals of 53 and 47 yards. Kansas City's offense couldn't mount a late scoring drive, putting extra pressure on this season finale. Las Vegas comes into this matchup after a 34-10 loss to the Giants in Week 17, a game in which the Raiders' struggling offense generated just 176 passing yards from Geno Smith, with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions before Smith exited with an ankle injury. And Las Vegas' defense was unable to contain New York's balanced attack that featured strong play from Jackson Dart and a special teams touchdown from Deonte Banks, leaving the Raiders to absorb their 10th straight defeat and cement their place atop next year's draft order. This Week 18 meeting pits a Chiefs team looking to salvage a season that never quite met expectations against a Raiders squad fighting status as the league's top draft candidate. And I'm leaning towards Kansas City to play with a bit more urgency and close with a win, leaving the Chiefs at 7-10 while the Raiders finish 2-15. As Kansas City's ability to tighten up offensively and take advantage of Las Vegas' continuing struggles gives them the edge in this divisional rivalry. Washington comes into this finale after a 30-23 loss to the Cowboys in Week 17, a game in which third-string quarterback Josh Johnson completed 15 of 23 passes for 198 yards, while rookie running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt energized the offense with 105 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, keeping the Commanders competitive, but costly defensive lapses and missed opportunities in the red zone ultimately let Dallas pull away, despite Washington recording 6 sacks and hanging around late. Philadelphia comes into this NFC East finale after a 13-12 win over the Bills in Week 17, a contest dominated early by the Eagles' defense and special teams before the offense tightened up, as Jalen Hurts connected with Dallas Goedert for a short touchdown, and Jake Elliott added field goals of 47 and 28 yards to build a 13-0 lead, with Philadelphia's defense forcing 6 punts and a takeaway and then holding off a late Buffalo rally, in which Josh Allen rushed for 2 short touchdowns but a failed 2-point conversion preserved the narrow Eagles' edge. The Eagles' offense struggled to sustain much after halftime, totaling just 16 yards on 18 second-half plays, but the defensive performance and clutch special teams play were enough to preserve the victory. This Week 18 matchup pits a Commanders squad that showed flashes on both sides of the ball despite a lopsided final record against an Eagles team that leaned on its defense and field position to eke out a critical divisional win. And I'm going with Philadelphia to finish strong and secure the NFC East, ending the season at 12-5 while Washington closes at 4-13, as the Eagles' ability to get timely stops and complementary scoring should prevail in this rivalry finale. Miami heads into Week 18 buoyed by a 20-17 win over the Buccaneers in Week 17, a game in which the Dolphins showed resilience and opportunistic play, as Quinn Ewers connected on a 63-yard touchdown strike to Theo Weiss Jr. early to flip momentum, and Greg Dulcich added another scoring reception, while Riley Patterson's field goals kept Miami ahead in a tight contest that saw the Dolphins' defense force critical turnovers and stymie Tampa Bay's offense at key moments, holding off a late Buccaneers touchdown and preserving the victory. The Dolphins' ability to mix explosive plays with defensive stops allowed them to grind out a meaningful win to enter this finale with confidence. New England, on the other hand, enters this finale after an emphatic 42-10 win over the Jets in Week 17, a performance powered by Drake May's career day, as he threw 5 touchdown passes and led 6 consecutive scoring drives, getting the ball to playmakers like Stephon Diggs and Ramondre Stevenson all afternoon, while the Patriots' defense neutralized New York's offense, consistently forcing 3-and-outs and turnovers on downs, and allowing only a late long run from Breece Hall to dent the final score. New England's offense was nearly flawless in that performance, dominating the first 3 quarters and putting up 35 points before halftime behind balanced, efficient play that controlled possession and tilted field position. This Week 18 matchup pits Miami's opportunistic, turnover-fueled win and ability to get big plays against a Patriots team that looked like one of the league's most complete units in Week 17. And I'm going with New England to carry that offensive precision into this game and close the regular season strong, improving to 14-3 while the Dolphins finish their season at 7-10. Detroit enters this Week 18 finale after being eliminated from playoff contention following a 23-10 loss to the Vikings in Week 17, a game where the Lions' normally efficient offense was derailed by a staggering 6 turnovers forced by Minnesota's defense, including multiple interceptions and recovered fumbles, and despite Jared Goff completing 18 of 29 passes for 197 yards and a touchdown late in the second quarter while the Lions outgained the Vikings in total yardage early, Detroit couldn't sustain drives or protect the football, and Minnesota also registered 5 sacks and a 65-yard rushing touchdown by Jordan Addison that sealed the contest and kept Detroit winless against the Vikings this season. Chicago comes into this matchup after a 42-38 loss to the 49ers in Week 17, a high-octane shootout in which Caleb Williams threw for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, and DeAndre Swift contributed on the ground with 9 carries for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns, but Chicago's defense struggled to contain big plays in critical moments as San Francisco engineered a last-minute go-ahead score. The contrast in these games is clear. Detroit's Week 17 loss highlighted how critical turnovers and defensive pressure can derail an otherwise competitive unit, while Chicago's narrow defeat showed its ability to move the ball and put up points even when its defense was stretched in a shootout. I am leaning towards the Bears to close out the regular season with a win and finish at 12-5, while the Lions end at 8-9, as Chicago's explosive offensive capabilities and experience in tight, high-scoring affairs should give them an edge over a Detroit squad still searching for consistency after its Week 17 struggles. Los Angeles enters this regular season finale after a 20-16 loss to the Texans in Week 17, a game that slipped away despite the Chargers staying competitive throughout, as Justin Herbert finished 21 of 32 for 236 yards with a touchdown and an interception, while consistently moving the offense between the 20s but struggling to cash in when it mattered most. The Chargers allowed steady pressure up front, surrendered multiple sacks, and saw promising drives stall due to missed opportunities and a costly red zone turnover, while the run game never fully established rhythm, leaving the offense overly reliant on Herbert late. Defensively, Los Angeles kept the game within reach by limiting explosive plays and holding Houston to 20 points, but extended drives wore them down and left little margin for error. Denver, meanwhile, is coming off a controlled 20-13 win over Kansas City in Week 17 that reflected their season-long identity, as Bo Nix threw for 182 yards with a touchdown while adding 42 rushing yards, and the Broncos leaned on long, methodical drives to dictate tempo and protect the football, finishing with over 300 total yards and consistently winning the field position battle. Denver's defense was equally impactful, bottling up Kansas City's offense, limiting chunk plays, and forcing punts throughout the game to preserve a second-half lead. This Week 18 matchup comes down to whether the Chargers can clean up their red zone execution and protection issues after a narrow loss, or whether Denver can once again impose its methodical, mistake-free style. And I'm leaning toward the Broncos to control the pace, close the season strong, and finish at 14-3, while the Chargers wrap up at 11-6 after another tightly contested division game. New York comes into this Week 18 matchup on the heels of a 42-10 loss to the Patriots in Week 17, a game in which the Jets' offense was thoroughly overpowered and managed only 77 total yards in the first half, before a 59-yard touchdown run from Breece Hall provided the lone bright spot. Brady Cook finished with 152 passing yards and an interception. Hall rushed for 111 yards before exiting with a knee injury, and New York's defense was unable to generate pressure or create takeaways, as New England used a balanced attack led by Drake May's 5 touchdown passes to build a commanding lead early. Meanwhile, Buffalo comes into Week 18 after a 13-12 loss to the Eagles, a tightly contested defensive battle in which Josh Allen completed 23 of 35 passes for 262 yards, but could not find the end zone through the air, instead sparking the offense late with a 2-yard rushing touchdown and another 1-yard rushing score, though a failed 2-point conversion kept the Bills just short in a game where they trailed through much of the first half and had to grind back into contention. Buffalo outgained Philadelphia in total yardage and sustained several long drives, but the Eagles controlled possession early and forced Buffalo into a 1-score margin that the Bills couldn't overcome. This Week 18 showdown pits a Jets team ending its season with clear offensive limitations and defensive struggles against a Bills squad that battled toe-to-toe with a playoff contender and showed resilience even in defeat. And I'm leaning towards Buffalo to finish the regular season with a win and end up 12-5, while the Jets close at 3-14, as the Bills' ability to move the ball and make enough key stops should be the difference in this finale. Baltimore enters this AFC North deciding Week 18 showdown, riding the momentum of a 41-24 win over the Packers in Week 17, a game defined by overwhelming physicality, as Derrick Henry carried the offense with 36 rushes for 216 yards and 4 touchdowns, allowing the Ravens to dominate time of possession and keep their passing game relatively simple, while the defense capitalized on that control by forcing Green Bay into obvious passing situations, with Marlon Humphrey picking off a pass by Clayton Tune, rookie Mike Green recovering a fumble, and limiting explosive plays after halftime. That performance highlighted Baltimore's identity when it's at its best, leaning on the run game to dictate tempo and letting the defense play downhill with a lead. Pittsburgh, on the other hand, comes in after a 13-6 loss to the Browns in Week 17, a frustrating outing where the Steelers' offense never found the end zone, despite Aaron Rodgers completing 21 of 39 passes for 168 yards, repeatedly stalling in Cleveland territory and settling for field goals, while the defense did enough to keep the game within reach by allowing just 13 points and holding Cleveland under 300 total yards, but never got the complementary offense it needed. With the division on the line, this matchup sets up as a contrast between Baltimore's surging run-first attack and Pittsburgh's need for a sharper, more decisive offensive showing, and I'm going with the Ravens to carry that Week 17 dominance into this game, claim the AFC North title, and finish the season 9-8, while the Steelers fall to 9-8 after coming up short in the finale. As we hit the regular season finale in Week 18, the playoff picture is almost fully formed, but the final pieces at the very top and across several divisions are still very much in motion, creating a weekend where seeding, buys, and home field advantage are all on the line. In the NFC, everything starts out west, where the Seahawks and 49ers square off with massive stakes attached, as Seattle controls its own destiny outright and can lock up the NFC West, the number 1 seed, and home field advantage with simply a win or even a tie, while San Francisco's path is just as clean on its side, needing a win to leapfrog Seattle and claim the division crown and top seed themselves. Down south, the NFC South remains unsettled heading into the final Sunday, with Carolina able to clinch the division and the number 4 seed by taking care of business or even benefiting from an Atlanta win elsewhere, while Tampa Bay still has a narrow route that requires a win paired with an Atlanta stumble, keeping that race alive into the final hours. Seeding beneath the top spot is just as fluid, as Chicago and Philadelphia continued their jockeying for the 2 and 3 seeds, with wins, ties, and losses between those two teams reshuffling home field matchups depending on how the dominoes fall, while San Francisco, Seattle, and the Rams all have paths that can land them anywhere from hosting a wildcard weekend to heading out on the road. Over in the AFC, the stakes are even heavier at the top, as Denver, New England, and Jacksonville are all still alive for the number 1 seed, with the Broncos able to clinch home field advantage outright with a win, while the Patriots and Jaguars each need specific help combined with victories to jump to the top of the conference. Jacksonville is also fighting on multiple fronts, as they can lock up the AFC South simply by winning or tying, while Houston still has a chance to steal the division with a win and a Jaguars loss, keeping that matchup firmly in focus. In the AFC North, it's as straightforward as it gets, with Pittsburgh and Baltimore each controlling their fate in a winner-take-all scenario for the division title, while behind them one of the most complex wildcard races in recent memory unfolds, as Houston, LA, Buffalo, and Jacksonville all have overlapping paths to the 5, 6, and 7 seeds that hinge on everything from head-to-head results to multi-team strength of victory tiebreakers across the league. With division titles, byes, home field advantage, and nearly every AFC wildcard slot still unsettled, Week 18 isn't just a finale. It's a high-stakes week where one win can mean a bye week and one loss can send a team on the road, making every snap across the league matter right up until the final whistle. And as always, the rules remain the same.